Welcome to the chapter number 11. Earlier we have seen till chapter number 10. So in this chapter we will understand about the new empire and the kingdoms. We in the previous classes we have covered that how empires developed and what type of kingdoms were getting birth at a different times. So we have also divided the different time periods. So let us understand about the new empire and the kingdoms, right? So initially it is telling us about the Prasastis, that what are the Prasastis. So let us understand about the Prasastis. So it is talking about the Samudragupta, and the information for the Samudragupta has been collected from inscriptions which has been inscribed on Ashokan pillars at Allahabad. So in the last classes we have seen that Ashoka was famously known for his inscriptions, pillar inscriptions and the rock edicts, right? So one of those pillars on Ashoka's pillar, the Prasasti has been inscribed about Samudragupta, and the detailed information has been found about the not only about the king, about the different aspects of his life. Right? So, who composed it? It was composed by his court poet. His court poet name was Harisen, who was a poet and a minister at the court of Samudragupta. So, in the history of Indian continent, Samudragupta plays an important role, right? So let us understand the bit more about Samudragupta and the Prasasti. So Prasasti is a Sanskrit word which meaning in praise of something. So Prasasti means the appreciation in the praise of something. So definitely, if a court poet is under or working for some king, then he must have praised his king that he was brave and how he took care of the entire kingdom. So these were the things which have been mentioned. So let us understand about these Prasasti. So Samudragupta's Prasasti. So it is providing the detail that Samudragupta was a warrior, and as we have already discussed, that's Harishena. He was the court poet, and he talked about the bravery of his king in this particular paragraph, like talking about that he was charming and like he had fought several battles, and because of that he had several marks on his face, like, and he used to fight with the arrows, spikes, spears, and these things were there. So of course we understand that whenever there were the fights, so the kings must have used the different type of tools and the weapons, right? So if there have been coins, these are the coins. There a king has been mentioned who is playing the veena. So if you will look here, then a king is playing veena in this particular coin. Right? So Harishana describes four different kind of rulers and tells us about the Samudragupta's policy toward them. So Samudragupta was a warrior, and he conquered most of the part of the Indian subcontinent, and there were four different kind of rulers to whom he conquered. So let us understand about these king and the kingdoms. Right? The first rulers were the of Aryavata. Now it is talking about the rulers and the quality. Here there were the nine rulers who were uprooted, and their kingdoms were made a part of the Samudragupta's empire. Right, so they were subdued. These nine kings were subdued, and their kingdoms were made the part of the Samudragupta. So this was part of their tactics of in that time, that the king used to defeat the other rulers who were not capable enough to give the equivalent fight. So they used to then later after subduing those kings, right? They used to he used to become a king of those kingdoms as well. Right? And there were the second rulers of Dakshinapatha, and there were 12 rulers. So remember that how many rulers were there and different names. Like there were the Aryavata, and there were nine kingdoms. And now it is talking about the Dakshinapatha, which is in the southern part. So 12 rulers, they surrendered to Samudragupta after being defeated, and then allowed them to rule again. So this type of rule, what is known as that they accepted the sovereignty of the this king, which was Samudragupta. So whenever Samudragupta defeated them and they accepted the sovereignty, it means that now they will follow the instruction of the king, right? and they will report to the king, and on the behalf of Samudragupta they are going to rule. And there were the third type of other states, the neighboring states such as Assam, coastal Bengal, Nepal, and the number of Ganasanghas. So in the previous chapters, we have understood about the Ganasanghas. So if you have not watched those videos, then you can go ahead and watch, and you would be able to understand about the basic of the Ganasanghas, that who are the Ganasanghas and how they were different from the monarchies. So they brought the tribute, follows his orders, and attended his court. So these were the people, or these were the kingdoms or kings who brought the different type of tributes. So we understand that whenever a king used to defeat them, so definitely the person who has defeated, who used to bring the different type of gifts and things just to please the king, right? So this was the part of their tactics, so that so the king could like be allowed to rule on their land, right? The rulers of the outlying the areas, the descendant of the Kusanas and Sakas, and the rulers of the Sri Lanka who submitted to him and offered daughters in marriage. So marital alliance were also prevalent in that time, because once the king has been defeated, then they used to offer the different kind of things. So they also offered the like the marital alliance with the superior king. So here the Samudragupta was being offered the daughters of these kings, right? So we will understand about the Kushanas, who were the Shakas, and how they pose a threat to the Indian subcontinent in that time. So here what we have seen, that four type of rulers which have been defeated by the Samudragupta. The first were the Aryabhat, right, and there were 9 kingdoms, and second were the Dakshinapatha, where the 12 rulers to whom he defeated, and the other were the neighboring state, third type rulers, where the Assam, coastal Bengal, Nepal, and the number of the Gana Sanghas were there. And the fourth one, the ruler of the outlying areas, who were the descendant of the Kushanas and the Shakas, right? So these were the people to whom he defeated. Now let us understand the further developments. So these are the area which have been mentioned in this map. So look closely that all these areas here, the if you see the red dotted areas, the cities conquered by the Guptas. So here it has been marked as the red dots, and these were the important cities in that time. These are the cities in the black dots, and the inner states which we have referred, these are the inner state which have been marked in the pink here. If we see some part of Rajasthan and then the northeastern part, right? So this part is part of the inner state, and the fourth one which we saw, that the outer states. So here it is talking about the outer states as well, right? And the part of the Aryavart. Here is the part of the Aryavart. So these were the different rulers and their rules, which was subdued by the Samudragupta. So he was very definitely, he must have been a famous king, right, and very powerful too. So now it is talking about the Vikram Samvat. The era beginning in the 58th BCE is traditionally associated with the Gupta king Chandragupta II. So we need to understand that whenever it refers to the Vikram Samvat, so it is referring to the in the time of Chandragupta, right? It is associated with the Chandragupta of the Gupta dynasty, and the Chandragupta II, who had founded it as the mark of victory over the Shakas and assumed the title of Vikramaditya. He not only defeated the Saka rulers but also adopted the title of Vikramaditya, and hence he started this calendar called as the Vikram Samvat. The Vikram Samvat has also been adopted along the Gregorian calendar as the national calendar for by independent India. So remember this, that along with the Gregorian calendar, the government of India after independent the national calendar has been adopted as Vikram Samvat. Vikram Samvat has been adopted as the national calendar, right? So remember this. And there it is also talking about the genealogies. So there were the different genealogies, like the different kings and their forefathers have been mentioned on the prasastis. So it is talking about that, but it is not important for us as of now. The only information which becomes important for us is that it is talking about this Samudragupta. Chandragupta was the first ruler of the Gupta dynasty to adopt the grand title of Maharaja the Raj. So remember this, that Chandragupta, he was the first ruler of the Gupta dynasty who adopted the title of Maharaja Dhiraj, a title that Samudragupta also used. So along with the Samudragupta, Chandragupta also used this Maharaja Dhiraj, and his great grandfather and grandfather mentioned simply Maharajas. So it provides us the information that these kings must have gradually rose into the importance, right? Because in the earlier period, if we look at the history of the Indian subcontinent, then there were the different kings, and the concept of centralized rule was there, and how whenever the centralized kingdom was weak, so the different kings who were ruling into the different part of the Indian subcontinent, they rose into the prominence. So this was the case with the Gupta dynasty as well, that how they rose into the prominent of the this time, and they became the one of the biggest ruler of the Indian subcontinent, right? So Chandragupta too, we know about him from the inscription and coins. So several coins and the inscription have been found about him. So he led an expedition to the Western India where he overcame to the last of the Sakas. We just looked into it that in the name of the Chandragupta too, he also adopted the title of the Vikramaditya after defeating the Sakas, and also started the a new calendar, Vikram Samvat, right? So his court was full of learned people, including the Kalidasa, the poet, and the Aryabhatta. So Kalidasa, Aryabhatta, and he was the astronomer. So there were the different people, and they were very learned men. So we will also understand about these people who were there and who wrote the different books and different type of things. Not only about the rules of the kings, but also about the different plays and the poems have been written by them. So we will understand in the later chapters, right? Now it is talking about the Harshvardhan. So till then we have already understood about the basic information about the how Gupta dynasty rose into the prominent, and the who were the important ruler of that time, and what important thing happened. And they to remember, there were two or three facts. One of those was the who was the court poet of the Samudragupta, right? So Harisena was the court poet of the Samudragupta. So remember this fact. And who started the Vikram Samvat, and who adopted, who was the first king in the Gupta dynasty who adopted the title of the Maharaja Dhiraj. So remember all these facts, which becomes really important. Now we will understand about the Harshvardhan and Harshcharitra. Harshvardhan, who ruled somewhere around 1400 years ago, his court poet was Banbhatta. So these facts which I am referring becomes really important, because these questions have been asked previously, not only in the different PCS exam, but the straightforward questions can be asked in the UPSC as well, right? So remember that for the purpose of the pre, it becomes important. So the court poet of Harsha was Banbhatta, and he wrote his biography named as Harshcharitra. So I have underlined all these important facts, and it was written in Sanskrit. So earlier we have already understood that how Sanskrit was once again getting the prominence, and because if we looked at the 6th century BCE, in that period, the Prakritic or Pali languages were the languages which were spoken into the in the common masses, right? And now how once again the Sanskrit became the important language for the people, right? So these facts becomes really important to keep this in mind, that how these developments were happening. So this gives us a detail about the genealogy of the Harsha and the how he became the king. So we will understand this basic concept also being provided in detail, that how became the king, right? Since he was not the eldest son of his father, but still he ruled as the king. So how he became the king, we will understand. So Yunzheng, who came to the court of the Harsha, he spent a lot of time in Harsha's court. So he also provided the detailed account of the Harsha's rule and how were the things in the time of when Harsha was ruling. And Harsha ruled the part of the Thanesar and Kannauj, right? So we will look into it. Harsha was not the eldest son of his father, but he became the king of Thanesar, right? Harsha was not the eldest son of his father, but became the king of Thanesar after both his father and eldest brother died. His brother-in-law was the ruler of Kannauj. So we were just looked into the fact that his brother-in-law was ruling into the Kannauj, and they were basically this dynasty used to rule into the Thanesar. But later on, because his brother-in-law also got died, so he also had to rule the part of the Kannauj as well. So he was his brother-in-law was killed by the ruler of Bengal, and Harsha took over the kingdom of Kannauj because of this killing. Because there was no one to rule the Kannauj, hence Harsha has to take over the this part as well. And Harsha led an army against the ruler of Bengal. So we will understand that who was the ruler and why he was doing all these things, right? And how Harsha defeated. So there was a long contest between the ruler of Bengal and the Harsha. So we will understand that story as well in the later chapters. So he was successful in the east and he conquered both Magadha and Bengal. So how he was a powerful ruler. So he did not only conquered the Magadha but also Bengal, and he was not successful elsewhere. He tried to cross the Narmada to march into Deccan. So of course, every king want to spread his kingdoms to the farthest regions. So he also tried the same. So he marched into the Deccan, but he was stopped by Chalukyan ruler. His name was Pulakeshin II. So this fact become important that when Harsha was trying to move into the Deccan, he was stopped by whom? So he was the Pulakeshin II, or sometimes this question can be asked in the other manners as well, that the Pulakeshin II stopped the Harsha to conquer the part of the Deccan, and the Pulakeshin used to belong to the which dynasty? So this question can be asked in this manner as well. So remember that Pulakeshin used to belong from the dynasty of Chalukyas, right? And who defeated the Harsha? Pulakeshin II. Remember this. Now it is talking about the other dynasties and the kings and kingdoms, the Pallavas, Chalukyas, and Pulakeshins Prasasti. The Pallavas and Chalukyas were the most important ruling dynasty in the South Indian during this period. So remember the names, the Pallavas and Chalukyas, right? Along with so these were the ruler who were ruling into the southern part, whereas the Harsha was ruling into the northern part. And the kingdoms of the Pallava spread to the region around their capital, Kanchipuram, to the Kaveri Delta. So Pallavas reign was spread to the from their capital Kanchipuram to the Kaveri Delta, while Chalukya's reign was spread to from Raichur Doab between the. So remember the important fact that where is Raichur Doab? Raichur Doab is between the river Krishna and Tungabhadra. So I have already underlined these facts, Krishna and Tungabhadra, and here is Raichur Doab. So remember this. So we understand, because any doab, whether it is Ganga Yamuna doab, whether it is Raichur doab or any different doabs, it always becomes a bone of contention because of the fertile land, right? And any king or kingdom always want their the people who are living into the kingdoms, the village men, they want to feed them, and he wants to keep them or happy, right? Hence, or since these are the places where the sufficient amount of crops can be grown, right? So land revenue becomes also important. So we have also already seen the bhagas and how these plays an important role for the prosperity of any king or kingdom, right? So remember the areas where the Chalukyas were ruling and the areas where the Pallavas were ruling, and the important capitals. So Aihole was the capital of the Chalukyas, and it was an important trading center. It developed as a religious center with a number of temples. So earlier we have already seen that whenever any temple, any area uh, where the temple starts to build, it always contributes to its prosperity, because temple activity, like the different people come to these part, such as pilgrims come to worship deities, and the different traders come to provide the different things, right? So it always some type of activity kept on happening here. Hence these temple became the important thing. The best known Chalukyan ruler was the Pulkeshin II. We know about him from the Prasasti, compromised by his court poet Ravikirti. So this fact becomes important, as we have already seen about the Pulkesin II, that he was a very brave uh, king who stopped the Harshvardhana's movement to the southern part, right? And his court poet, who was his court poet? His court poet was Ravikirti. Remember this fact. Ravikirti was his court poet. This tells us about his ancestors who are traced back to through four generations from the father to son. The Pulkesin evidently got the kingdom from his uncle. So let us understand the further things. So according to the Ravi Kirti, who was the court poet of whom? Pulkesin II. He led the expedition along the both west and the east coast, and the Pulkesin also attacked the Pallavan king, who took the shelter behind the walls of the Kanchipuram. So, of course, we understand that the poets used to write these kind of things to please their kings, right? And Chalukya's victory was short-lived. Why short-lived? That the both Pallavas and the Chalukyas gave way to the new rulers belonging to the Rashtrakuta and the Chola dynasty. So we will understand about the Palas, Pratiharas, Rashtrakutas, and the Chola dynasties, and how they developed, gradually came into the prominence, right? And what was the impact or they made on these part of the India, right? So let us understand about the administration. So land revenue remained the important for these rulers, and since we have already understood that why land revenue became important and why they always wanted to conquer the places of the Doabs, such as the Raichur Doabs or the Ganga Yamuna Doabs. So these places become important because of the fertility of the land, right? And the villages remained the basic units of the administration. So remember this fact that the how villages always plays an important role, and they were the basic unit of the administration. Some of the important administrative posts were now hereditary. So what type of changes happened in during this time that the administrative post became hereditary means once the father has been died, whatever the post his father was holding, the son will also hold the same position. Though, so this is called as the hereditary succession, right? The poet Harisena was a Mahadanda Nayaka, or a chief judicial officer like his father. So we have seen that the Harisena was the court poet of Samudragupta, and he was not only poet. Along with that, he was also Mahadanda Nayaka. So remember this term, that Mahadanda Nayaka means chief judicial officer, right? And it was also a hereditary position. So he must have got this position because of his father was Mahadanda Nayaka. So one person held many offices. For instance, like beside being a Mahadanda Nayaka, Harisena was a Kumar Amatya, meaning an important minister, right? So remember these terms as well, like the who. What was the meaning of Kumar Amatya? Kumar Amatya meaning the important minister, and Sandhi Vigrahika meaning the minister of war and peace. So remember these terms which I am referring. Sandhi Vigrahika, a person who is the minister of war and peace, Kumaramatya, meaning an important minister. So Harisena not only had the position of the Mahadandanayaka, apart from this, he was also a Kumaramatya. Apart from this, he was also a Sandeep Vigrahika. So three or four positions he was holding altogether. So important man probably had to stay in the local administration, included the Nagar Shrestris or chief bankers or the merchant of the cities. So Nagar Shrestris, as we can understand by the term, the person who is the best in the in that Nagar or the place, right? So he used to be called as the chief banker or the merchant of the city, and the Sartwaha or a leader of the merchant caravans. So these terms becomes really important. So remember these terms. Pratham Kulika of the chief. Pratham, who was the Pratham Kulika? Pratham Kulika means the chief craftsman, right? And the head of the Kayasthas or the scribes, right? So these terms become really important. Now talking about the what type of the armies were there. So there were the military leaders who provided the king with the troops whenever he needed them. So they were not paid in regular salaries. So in different time periods, so different type of administrations get developed, right? So in this time period, according to the requirement, there so the administration got developed that the military leaders were not paid in regular salary, right? Rather than they received the grants of land, and these men were known as samantas. So the person who were receiving these grants of the land, these becomes the samantas. And whenever there was a weak ruler, these samantas rose into the prominence and became the independent ruler of that area, right? So it also tells us about the nature of the Indian polity, or that how the people used to come become the kings whenever they got an opportunity. So this type of things will prevalent till the medieval India, right? And to the later time as well, until unless the different like the Britishers will come and the Dutch will come. So till that time, these type of things will keep on happening, right? So inscriptions of Pallavas mention local assemblies. So now the assemblies becomes really important, right, for the purpose of the pre, because straightforward question can be asked like the what is sabhas, what is samiti, what is the ur, right? So remember this, that I am going to tell about these samitis on the sabhas. The inscription of Pallava mention about the local assemblies included the Sabha. Sabha means which was an assembly of Brahmin and landowners. So Sabha was the assembly of whom? Brahmin and landowners, means the people who were rich or who were the upper varnas. So this assembly functioned through the subcommittees which looked after the irrigation, agriculture, operation, making roads, local temples. So there were the several things and several type of works being handled by these assemblies, which was Sabha, and now the Ur. Ur was a village assembly found in areas where the landowner were not Brahmins. So if they were not the Brahmin, then the people of the villages used to get together, and that assembly used to called as the Ur, right? And the Nagara was an organization of merchant. So the important people of the Nagara, like the traders, used to live. The traders were used to live into the uh, important cities, which used to called as Nagara. So remember these, the Ur, Sabha, or the Nagaram. So Kalidas is known for his play depicting life of the kings of the court. Since we have already understood that uh, the the king used to have the different scholars, and Kalidas was the one of the important uh, poet in the history of the Indian subcontinent, right? An interesting feature about these plays, like so remember, so understand this part as well, that why Kalidasa was the important, and how he tried to display the people into the different form, and what type of society was getting developed. He also tried to display that as well. The Kalidasa is known for his play depicting the life in the king's court. An interesting feature about these plays is that the kings, most Brahmins, are shown as speaking Sanskrit. So the important people used to talk in Sanskrit, whereas the women and the men and the other kings, and apart from Brahmin, who were not kings or were not the Brahmins, they used Prakrit. So it is also providing us the detail about that, how not only in the Varna system but also the rigidity also shown into the languages, that the important people were talking in Sanskrit, while as the women and the other people who were not the powerful, they used to, and the common people who used to talk into the Prakrit. And the play which was one of the plays which was really famous was Abhijanam Sakuntalam, is the story of the love between the king named Dushyanta and the young woman named Shakuntala. So they just remember the name of the play, Abhijanam Sakuntalam, right? So there's a story which is of no importance to us, right? The Chinese pilgrim Huaiyan noticed the plight of those who were there treated as untouchables by the high and the mighty. So how they expected to live, they expected to live on the outskirts of the city. So they were badly treated, the people who were called as the so-called untouchables, and they were badly treated and they used to live to the outskirts. So the Fayan also provides us the detail that what type of behavior other people used to have to do with them, and how this person has to inform to the other people that nobody needs to touch him. If such a man enters a town or a marketplace, he strikes a piece of wood in order to keep himself separate, and people hearing this sound know that it means to avoid touching him or brushing against him. So this type of plight, or this type of social discrimination was happening there in that time. So Fahian provide the details about that as well, so we can understand that what type of social discrimination were the prevalent, right? It was not only provided in the plays but also provided in the different books, right? And the other details which we see, and we will also understand these differences in the later chapters as well. So this particular paragraph is talking about the king's army, so which is of no importance to us. It is only talking about the grandeur of the kings. So what was happening into the other parts of the world? So Arabia, it is a desert, because we know that the Arabian Peninsula is a desert. So Arab merchant and the sailors played an important role in the sea trades between India and the Europe. Of course, we understand that they played an important role, and they used to trade using the sea routes, right? And sometimes they also use the land routes as well. The others who lived in the Arabia were the Bedouins, the pastoral tribes. So important fact I have already underlined and circled it. Who were the Bedouins? They were the pastoral tribes depending mainly on camels, hardy animals that could survive in the desert, right? So around 1400 years ago, Prophet Muhammad introduced a new religion, Islam, in Arabia. Similar to the Christianity, Islam was a religion that laid stress on the equality and the unity of all before Allah and the one supreme court. So this was the uh, doctrine of Islam, right? And how it got developed, it is talking about that. So this was the development which happened in this time. So now we have completed the chapter number 11, and we have understood the different dynasties, different court poets. So important facts I have already underlined, right? So revise them, and I will see you in the next chapter, which will be the last lesson for the class 6 history. Then we will move on to the next uh, book. Okay, till then, bye.